If you've been considering how to improve your astrophotography images, you may initially think of getting a new telescope, or perhaps a better camera, improved filters, or a newer, more expensive mount. But it may actually be that the best way to improve your astrophotography is simply to change your monitor. The use of inappropriate monitors for developing astrophotography, I am certain, has contributed to many of the color problems and certain myths that are often found in astrophotography, such as that persistent myth that space isn't black. Something I addressed a long time ago in a previous video. Space, technically, is the matrix in which matter, energy, and every other strange and marvelous component that comprises our cosmos, such as dark matter and whatnot, exist. But in the absence of a light-emitting source or something to reflect that light off of, space is black. Because black isn't a color, black simply is the absence of something to see. And empty space is as black gets. But the problem in relating things such as color, and in particular the conundrum of black, is that our current monitor technology is built on and focused around relating images taken of subjects on Earth. Before we go any further, let's define the challenges relevant to this topic that astrophotography presents. Firstly, as we all know, astrophotography means working with very low light subjects, unless you happen to be one of those people that really enjoys photographing the sun or the moon. For those of us such as myself, who focus on deep sky objects, and often deep sky objects that are extremely far away in the cosmos, we are working with subjects that need to be imaged over multiple nights to collect enough light information to relate them. Modern monitors simply are not built for this. They are built for the bright and busy environments to be found here in the world, or that of the virtual worlds of games. So, relating the color, brightness, and detail of such subjects can present a challenge for computer monitors today. In particular, we are often working with colors that are enhanced and presented in a way that modern monitors are not calibrated for. The subtle colors that are found in RGB and LRGB images, and the false color introduced into narrowband images, are absolutely not what the designers of modern monitors had in mind. And so a poorly color-calibrated monitor may do a poor job of relating those colors. For the developer of an astrophotography image, this means that if you develop your images to relate a certain balance of color to the viewer, but the viewer is using a monitor that has a different color balance, they may see something that's quite different and perhaps even off-putting compared to what you saw when you were developing your image. The other major conundrum that we face is the relating of space. Unless one is shooting a very large DSO, for example the Andromeda Galaxy or the North American Nebula, space is going to play a significant role in any astrophoto. And if that space is entirely devoid of things that actively emit or reflect light, then space is going to be black. And almost all modern monitors are very, very poor at relating black space. Those monitors that are backlit may simply never be able to become dark enough at all. And monitors that do not have good contrast ratios will often crush space, so that different areas of space with slightly different degrees of darkness may come to look patched together within an image, like this. This brings us to a discussion of the various kinds of monitors. This won't be a comprehensive discussion. The technology is once again in rapid development, and in 5 to 10 years, we may see new technologies that will resolve many of the issues that are up for discussion today. The most common modern monitor type is the IPS monitor. This technology uses a form of backlit LCD that, if calibrated properly, can have great color fidelity, and is also noteworthy for its fast refresh rates, or how quickly the image can change without such issues as ghosting and flaring. And these types of monitors tend to be long-lived without suffering such issues as burn-in, where unchanging things that are looked at for a long time would have a tendency to burn into the background of an image, like a ghostly impression. Because of their color fidelity and durability, these monitors are popular for many applications these days, such as gaming, watching movies, and even professional videographers and photographers often use them for image development. But for developing photography, videography, and especially astrophotography, they do suffer some significant weaknesses. One of the key ones is they suffer fairly low contrast ratios, and this is the ability of a monitor to accurately relate differences in the gradients of darkness. Monitors with low contrast ratios will lose detail in darker areas, and they will be more inclined to black crushing, which looks like this in an astrophoto. It happens when one region of space in an astrophoto is very slightly less dark than another. The very subtle gradations of darkness are too much for the monitor to handle at that very low range of light, so it just lumps all the gradations of darkness together. IPS monitors can be great monitors for developing brighter images, and they're good monitors for developing color. But for we astrophotographers, their inability to handle darkness creates a significant problem. To cope with this over the years, astrophotographers have lightened the darker regions of their image to avoid the crushing issue. And this has resulted in countless, truly countless images with gray space, and has doubtless been a key part in the creation of the myth that space is not black. Because of this, I really don't think that IPS monitors are great choices for astrophotographers. They work for almost everybody else just fine, but for astrophotography development, it honestly is a poor choice. Even the very best IPS monitors sporting some of the new technologies such as IPS Black, which offers higher contrast ratios, don't offer nearly enough of an advantage to really relate good space. And since astrophotography is very often about relating good space, for us, that makes them poor choices. Now there is a monitor type that does extremely well at relating space, OLED, which stands for Organic LEDs. OLED monitors are not backlit. Each LED is capable of emitting its own light. Because of this, each LED on the monitor is capable of relating exactly the amount of brightness or darkness that is appropriate to the LED, and therefore OLED monitors have infinite contrast. So it doesn't matter how subtle the deviations in darkness within an image are, OLED monitors will never cause black crushing. And for astrophotographers, this is a huge advantage. But these monitors suffer some significant drawbacks. One of them is that while they can relate brilliant and accurate colors, over time, the organic material that is used to make these LEDs will deteriorate. And so the color accuracy will change over time. Now, OLED monitor makers deal with this by equipping such monitors with internal tools that allow them to compensate. And every so often, the monitors will assess themselves and recalibrate to make sure that they are relating relatively balanced levels of brightness, darkness, and color. But while this can extend the life of an OLED monitor, eventually the monitors will become so deteriorated that they will reach a point where they're no longer really useful. However, that takes a long time, and with normal usage, modern OLED monitors can easily last 10 years. But as monitors go, they're fairly expensive, anywhere from 2 to 4 times more expensive than IPS monitors, so when you do have to replace one, it's a significant expense. Their prices have gone down over the years, but even so, a good OLED monitor that's good for image development is going to cost in the range of $1,200 Canadian, that's probably $800 or $900 American. But the single most significant issue these monitors have is the problem of burn-in. Because of this, these monitors are not great for regular usage. You wouldn't want to use an OLED monitor for ordinary daily tasks such as work, internet viewing, or balancing your budget, because the boundaries, bars, and buttons of those applications will eventually burn into the monitor, so there'll be a ghost image of them in the viewing area at all times, and it doesn't take long for that burn-in to begin to happen, as little as 3 months. Such monitors really should only be used for viewing images, movies, and games. But if you're an astrophotographer and you have the budget for an OLED monitor, it can be useful to develop your image on another type of monitor and then drag the image over to an OLED monitor, especially to double-check its presentation of darker areas, using the monitor in particular to see if there is black crushing. This can be especially useful if you expect that most of the persons who will view your images will be looking at them on tablets, iPads, and cell phones. OLED monitors do produce superior images, and since tablets, iPads, and cell phones aren't expected to last all that long anyway, they make good screens for such devices. And it can also be helpful to use an OLED monitor if preparing your images for high-quality printing. But there is an alternative to the IPS and the OLED monitor, one that gives you the great and durable color fidelity of an IPS monitor, with much higher contrast ratios than you'll get with any IPS monitor, not quite matching the capability of OLED monitors with their infinite contrast ratio, but which are still capable of presenting very pure blacks, thereby avoiding much of the dilemma of black crushing, and the dilemma of space that has been brightened by backlighting, both of which have contributed to so many astrophotographers creating images with gray space and leading to the myth that space is gray. And, happily, this option is very affordable. It's the VA monitor. VA monitors are very affordable because they're a type of LCD panel, the same type of panel upon which IPS is based. They will probably never be very popular with gamers because they don't have great response times. That's the time it takes any individual pixel in the display to change color. And in the old days of VA technology, they used to suffer in the display of color, somewhat offsetting their advantages in contrast. But VA technology has come a long way, and good modern VA monitors are very affordable, costing about in the price range of IPS monitors, offer superb and faithful color, and they have that tremendous advantage in contrast, which is especially useful for astrophotographers, allowing them to relate to rich, deep blacks. Their main disadvantage, compared to their cousin in technology, IPS monitors, is they have narrower viewing areas. I have two VA monitors, and with both of them, it's best if I sit right in front of them for doing my work, but that's not an issue because that's what I always do. I find if I get about more than 25 degrees to the left or right of either monitor, the picture begins to degrade a little. But that's such a wide variation, 50 degrees to either side, that moving around a little bit, leaning on the desk, moving back up a little bit, it doesn't make any real difference. It only makes a difference if I happen to stand up and be looking at the monitor from someplace else in the room, and I can still plainly see what the image is showing, and the image still looks good. It's just somewhat faded from wide angles. Over the many years that I have been involved in shooting photography and professional photography and astrophotography, I have really come to think that VA monitors are presently the very best option for photographers of all kind, but especially astrophotographers. The VA monitor that I'm using, a BenQ EW3227OU, has a 3000:1 native contrast ratio, which is more than 3 times the average native contrast of an IPS monitor, providing for very rich, deep blacks that rarely crush. In fact, in my videos and photos, if you see black crushing, and you will in some of them, that's due to internet limitations and the limitations of YouTube compression. It's not due to the monitor. On my monitor, these images appear perfect. But the internet imposes its own limitations, and that's another topic entirely. Now, I'm sure that you can tell that for me, my primary consideration among these monitors is their ability to relate good blacks. The OLED, which is a different kind of monitor technology, is clearly the king at relating blacks with its infinite contrast level. And second to OLED would be monitors with VA technology, with contrast ratios ranging from 3000:1 to 4000:1 or higher. And when it comes to the relating of blacks, IPS monitors fall distantly behind them. Despite their many advantages such as color fidelity and fast refresh rates and response times, they just can't manage good blacks. But in the realm of astrophotography, where our subjects are set in the vast darkness of space, the ability to relate good blacks is crucial. Let's look more at color now. To keep it simple, think of it like this. A color space is a potential range of color. Monitors have a color gamut. That is the amount of color within that space that they can actually present. sRGB is an older color gamut, and it's still the standard for the internet. Any decent monitor these days should be able to present 100% of the sRGB color space. It's not the full range of color that the human eye can perceive, but if a monitor can present the entire sRGB color space, you are well capable of creating beautiful images. However, as compared to wider color gamuts, you will notice a difference if those images are compared side by side. A much wider color gamut that is becoming the standard for modern devices is the DCI P3, sometimes just known as Display P3. In many of my previous videos, you would have heard me refer to it that way, or even just D3 or P3. It is 26% broader than the old sRGB color space. For a long time, it seemed that another color space, Adobe RGB, would become the dominant color space that modern devices would aim for. However, the DCI P3 color space covers about the same range as Adobe RGB, but leans a little more into the blues and the greens, which just happens to work better with modern technologies. So, by dint of the natural evolution of technology, it is becoming predominant. In fact, most tablets and cell phones now use the DCI P3 color space as a standard, and it's slowly becoming standardized on computer monitors. It is, for all intents and purposes, the future. So because of this, when selecting a computer monitor, it should at the very minimum be able to give you 100% of the sRGB color space. That is not considered a very broad technical challenge anymore. And monitors offering less than that, honestly, the manufacturers just went cheap. However, for even better colors, your monitor should be able to give you at least 95% of the Adobe RGB color space, or an even better choice would be the DCI P3 color space. Persons viewing your images online would not be able to tell the difference because the internet is universally restricted to the sRGB color space. But if you share your images in other ways, such as you sell them to media, share them with friends, or create prints of them, the wider color spaces will be advantageous in the long run. Another consideration would be HDR, and HDR can give you better transition between lights and dark on your monitor. But the problem is, HDR standards are not universally implemented very well, which means that how my HDR image looks on my monitor is likely to be quite different from how it looks on your monitor. They may see the colors or the lighting differently, considerably differently from how you develop the image. The BenQ monitor I mentioned earlier is capable of good HDR. However, I quit using the HDR feature ages ago in the development of my images because other persons were seeing different colors and different lighting. The images looked weird or sometimes just wrong. It only looked good on the BenQ monitor and other monitors that happen to share this monitor's particular standard. So my advice honestly is don't worry about HDR. If you're using an OLED monitor, it's sort of natively HDR, and the presentation of color and light that you see on an OLED monitor should look good on the other monitors. But for the LCD monitors, it's probably not worth worrying about HDR at this time. While there are many other facets of monitor technology, for astrophotographers, 3 other things really come to mind, one of which is monitor brightness. But honestly, unless you're working in a very bright room, I don't think it's too much of an issue. And frankly, if you're doing image development, you shouldn't be working in a very bright room. The room doesn't have to be dark, but the light should be soft, mild, and no intense directional light sources such as bright exposed windows, so that you can clearly and easily perceive the image presented on your monitor and also easily make out the subtlest derivations of light, shadow, and color. Because of this, I don't think that how bright a monitor can be is all that important. You're much better off focusing on good presentation of black and color, and if you find the environment that you're doing your photo editing in to be too bright, soften the light. Put a heavier curtain in front of your window or dim the lights. Another key element is resolution, and when it comes to resolution, the more the better. If you're viewing your images on a 1080p monitor or monitor with 1080 resolution, it's not going to be able to relate nearly the amount of fine detail that has probably been caught by your camera. This will soften details, and if the details are softened, you will not even be able to sharpen them accurately, because your monitor simply will not allow you to be able to see all the detail that's there to be sharpened. At the very minimum these days, you should be using a 4K monitor. Fortunately, 4K has become quite affordable. The BenQ monitor that I mentioned earlier that I prefer for my photo editing is a 4K, and I think it's been 3, maybe 4 years since I bought it, and even then, that monitor was only 329 Canadian. What's that, maybe 250 American? And these days, there are monitors out there with even greater amounts of resolution, such as 8K monitors. And those monitors will be able to relate the fine detail within your image even better. But they are quite pricey, and you do have to bear in mind you may be sharpening those images only for yourself and a very small select few persons who will see them. Because given the cost of such monitors and the immense size of the image files that would be required to be able to perceive that much detail, not too many other people are going to, at least at this time, be using monitors of that resolution. Therefore, 4K is probably quite adequate for this point in time. And fortunately at this time, 4K is very affordable. And the final issue to consider is color fidelity. Now, all the monitor types, even IPS monitors, can drift a little bit in their color fidelity over time. Though for IPS and VA monitors, both of which are based on LCD technology, this isn't really that much of an issue unless you happen to be a colorist working on videography or a professional photographer working on still images. Nonetheless, it may still be an area of concern, because if your color does drift, it means that while you might see accurate, nice color on your monitors, persons viewing your images will see somewhat skewed colors on their own devices and monitors. Sticking to the standards helps minimize the difference in what they perceive. Many manufacturers calibrate their monitors before they leave the factory so that the colors are accurate. And some manufacturers produce carefully calibrated monitors especially for video and photography editors. Some of the Asus ProArt monitors come to mind. But even then, over time with any monitor, calibration will shift a bit. You can get applications and hardware to calibrate your monitor, but it can be pricey. But if you invest in those things, you don't have to spend more money on a pre-calibrated monitor, and that will save money on the initial monitor purchase. Plus, you can calibrate the monitors down the line with that equipment, which is helpful because no matter what, any monitor's color will drift a bit over time. Also, some monitors will come from the manufacturer carefully color calibrated, but the manufacturers might not note that in the description of the product. Sometimes they'll only note it if they are intending the monitor to be sold specifically to the photography or video editing crowd. But if you dig into the technical details, it'll indicate if it was color calibrated. If it was but not noted, you found a bargain. And one last pointer about color, be sure your monitor comes with at least 10-bit color. 8-bit, while it doesn't produce bad color, is really behind the times, and if you have a good monitor, you will notice the difference between 8-bit and 10-bit color. So, where does all this lead? Well, if money is no object and you don't mind replacing a monitor every 5 to 10 years, OLED for astrophotographers is obviously the best choice. It will give you better darker areas, better space by orders of magnitude. But it is a pricey option, costing in general 2 to 3 times what an IPS or VA monitor does. And in time, images will burn into the monitor and color will drift, leading to the necessity to replace the monitor. However, if you're not using the monitor for editing or other work, or any type of application that's going to have control bars and buttons and such appearing in the same place all the time, if you're only using the monitor for proofing your final images and perhaps viewing videos and gaming, that monitor can last for many years, in fact well beyond 10 years. If your primary concerns are color fidelity and avoiding burn-in over time, then IPS is the obvious choice. However, for astrophotography, it is not the ideal choice. I will emphasize, not the ideal choice, because IPS monitors have poor contrast ratios, averaging no more than 1,000 to 1. And you hear about this new IPS Black claiming to get averages of 2,000 to 1. Many independent tests don't quite substantiate those claims, and even if they were getting 2,000 to 1, it's poor for astrophotography purposes. But if you need to be very budget conscious and you're looking for a general purpose monitor that will also be good for watching videos and playing games, IPS may be considered an acceptable compromise for you, but it is far from the ideal for astrophotography, due in particular to the technology's poor presentation of space. Personally, I'm not much of a gamer, but I am budget conscious, and I don't have to want to switch between monitors to do video editing or photo editing and then do other kinds of work. So I went with a VA monitor. And I think VA monitors are the best option for not only for astrophotographers, but for all kinds of photographers these days. Like IPS monitors, they do not suffer burn-in issues, but unlike IPS monitors, they have far higher contrast ratios, allowing the presentation of space and other dark spaces without too much risk of black crushing. And what risk there is easily managed. And while there was a time when VA was out of favor because it had some difficulty with color production, modern VA monitors are very color faithful. And good VA monitors can produce over 95% of the DCI-P3 color space. Issues such as response times, where they continue to lag a bit behind IPS monitors, though they have gotten much better, have been very much improved. But for persons whose primary concern is the development of video, and particularly still images, issues such as response times are not major considerations. So, in conclusion, the monitor that you use to develop your astrophotography is exceedingly important, and to be honest, I would rate it to be as important as what telescope or camera or mount that you select to shoot your images with. In fact, in many ways, it's more important because if your monitor cannot relate good, accurate information with you, information without introduced flaws, such as black crushing or poor color fidelity, if it relates the image to you poorly, you will not be able to develop the image to the best of your ability, which means you will not be able to get nearly as much quality out of the information as you could. And no matter how adept you are at developing, other persons will not see the same image you do. In fact, they may see a rather poor rendition. So it is well worth taking some time to consider what monitor you are using and then reconsider if you need a new one. I hope that helps, and if you have any questions, comments, or observations, please leave them in the comment section below. Thank you to everyone who's been watching and for all your support of the Sky Story channel. Now, get out there and shoot the sky.